Today I'm going to play devil's advocate about the advent of remakes. Why? Because I think that they have gone out of style and they deserve to be put back in style again. Because there is more to them than just everybody being understandably mad about Disney live action adaptations. So please forgive if there's any remnant of my AC in the back. It's very hot. I'm also very tired. I've had a lot going on, mostly good stuff. Been keeping very busy, and I'm sneaking this Kirblog recording in actually right after my monthly Discord Patreon Q&A. So thanks to actually quite a few folks that are here listening live as I'm recording this, probably the day before I post it up on YouTube. But nonetheless, so J9 asked about my thoughts on remakes in general. So funnily enough, I have had remakes in my life for many years, literally since I was a kid. The very first one that I can vividly remember, weirdly enough, speaking of Disney live action movies, was the 101 Dalmatians live action adaptation with Glenn Close. Now, I grew up with all classic Disney movies. So I'd seen the animated versions of all of these first, of course. That wasn't my first exposure to that story or anything, but just on a whim, I think we went to go see it in theaters. I'm fairly certain of that, or if not, we rented it from Blockbuster at the time when that was the thing. But I remember just not even thinking having any kind of thought in my mind about they're ruining it or whatever, because funnily enough, and this is not a remake, but this is just for a sake of comparison. Prior to this, I had watched the live action Super Mario Brothers movie and actually didn't even get through it all the way because the scene with Toad getting turned into a freakish Goomba thing scared the shit out of me. I was like 6, so wasn't into that. But I was also upset because I'm like, this doesn't feel like Mario at all. And that was my first, exposure to crappy live action adaptations that, don't necessarily respect the source material. But on a whim, I went to go see, or went to go watch the 101 Dalmatians live action remake from whatever year that was. And I remember genuinely enjoying it. And it wasn't in any way like, oh, this is better than the original to me. I just liked it. And I liked the fact that for the most part, it was the same story, more or less. I do distinctly remember a couple things, with oh my God, what's Pongo's owner's name? I'm losing my mind. But he was like a video game designer instead of a musician. And they had this nice looking 2D animated sequence of, of a little baby version of Pongo running away from, like a dog catcher or something, and he has to come up with a scarier idea for a villain, which of course becomes something like Cruella in the later half. And I was thinking to myself, that doesn't look like a video game. That looks like a 2D animated movie. That's too ahead of the time. We don't have video games that look like that yet. Now we do. Points to Cuphead. But yeah. So the thing is, when I watched that, I didn't have necessarily any thought went one way or the other. It was literally just watching a movie, and it happened to be a remake of a movie that I had already seen. And that was literally it. It was as straightforward and as simplistic as that, honestly. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So that started as something. And then I didn't really think about remakes when it came to movies all that much either, over time. Because I couldn't even think of in fact, if anything, I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head either, but it's very possible that I had seen a remake of a movie before I had seen the original, because whatever it was might have come out at the time that, I was, a kid or a teenager or whatever. And it might have just been, something, relevant that I wanted to go see for whatever reason, or maybe my parents would have put it on or they took me to see it or something. And that was it. So my early days of that, I wasn't thinking too much about it. And I guess in a certain sense, maybe I was the target audience in the sense that if that was my first exposure to something, to a movie, or in some cases a game, I was just watching it like any other movie. And if it holds up, as what it is, and people enjoy it, and that is their first exposure to it, then, I mean, there's really no harm in that if, it's executed well. But I think that the argument is that, like, if something is so sacred as what it is the original, and then if in some way what they do feels like a bastardization of it, whether that be straying too far away from the source material, or just actually trying to do the literal term of remaking it, and that's the thing is, what I want to go over with this is specifically like remakes, as in you're taking literally what the material is and you're doing a remake of it. I don't mean a reimagining of something, because a reimagining to me is like completely interpreting the source material in its own unique way. You know what I mean? Like in the sense that like, from version to version of like X-Men, X-Men Evolution, nor Wolverine and the X-Men, they are not remakes of the X-Men shows that came before. They are reinterpretations. They are doing their own thing with some of the same ideas as the source material from the comics. And I don't know if the 90s series ever like did like one-to-one adaptations of any of the actual comic stories. They might not have, or they might have. I don't know, because I didn't watch it all that extensively. But I look at those as, I don't quantify those as remakes necessarily. But when it came to video games, in my case, I have played, and especially in the case of Nintendo stuff specifically, and some otherwise, some Sony stuff and otherwise, I have played a pretty large handful of remake games. And I gotta say, there's actually probably a bigger ratio of games that I either liked more than the original or appreciated as much as the original in a different kind of way. You know what I mean? I mean, like, the list goes on in terms of like, Mario 64 versus Mario 64 DS. Same experience, a lot of extra fun stuff that I did enjoy, and actually finally getting to play as the other Mario characters, which, we had heard rumors of and, fantasized about for years leading up to that. And, Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland, and Superstar Ultra, which I grew up with the original versions of those games. And in fact, and of course, the biggest of all is, of course, the recent Mario RPG and Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remakes, which I think are fantastic. And yeah, they're, as much as I have a huge attachment to the original, like in the case of Mario RPG, like, it'll never replace the original for me, because I always do genuinely love the Super Nintendo aesthetic of going back and replaying the original one as it is. But I mean, my God, the extra stuff that they added and the quality of life improvements, especially the RPG kind of elements of them, I really appreciated that a lot. Now, interestingly, one that I will mention, and this is going to be probably a very divisive kind of take, but so I grew up with the original Pokemon Red and Blue that we first got in the US. And then I bought Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green in the early 2000s alongside Gen 3. And I also got Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, which I know from hardcore fans, a lot of people criticize the Let's Go games quite a bit. But I gotta say, so I have now, in the last 10 years, I have replayed most recently Pokemon Red. I played a mod version of it that made me enjoy it quite a bit more than I think I would have if I just played the straight original as it is. And I also replayed Fire Red probably about 7 years ago with some friends at the time. And I remember we were doing a stream of it where we'd play for like 2 or 3 hours. And then off screen, I had to grind like you would not believe. I had to fight so many wild Pokemon. I had to fight so many trainers, like go ahead to different areas and fight some of the random trainers and stuff like that. And just to be able to get enough experience points distributed between my whole team to be able to even progress at all when we were on stream. And as I was doing that off stream, I wasn't enjoying myself. I was like, God, this is so grindy. And I know that that's a whole separate subject. A lot of people complain about how in the later Pokemon games they made it like too easy, you know, to earn EXP. And a lot of people didn't enjoy that. And then that kind of led to stuff like, you know, Nuzlocks and, you know, some of those kind of different special runs happening. But no, as by the time I was in my 20s and, you know, approaching my 30s and now in my 30s, I don't like grinding. I really, really don't like grinding. I was very thankful that in the mod that I was playing of Original Red, it wasn't that obnoxious, and I beat everything in the entire game in about 40 hours in total from all the streams that I did. But in Fire Red, my God, it was not an enjoyable experience having to grind in between everything. As much as I do like the way the general aesthetic, the graphics, the updated movesets, and obviously the battle system. They had the Pokemon passive abilities that were established in Ruby and Sapphire, of course, you know, and some of the extra stuff. But even then, like the Sevi Islands, I actually don't like the Sevi Islands that much. I wasn't a big fan of that. I like the rematches, you know, refighting the Elite Four and, being able to capture all the newer Pokemon that had been released, through Gens 2 and 3 by that point. All that stuff was great. But the actual, like, process of having to level up with the older battle systems from that era, not a good time. So, in addition to that, when I was a kid, I had like dreamed ever since Pokemon Stadium of getting a 3D remake of the original Pokemon Red and Blue back before Gold and Silver was even a thing. I literally just wanted a 3D like N64 version of Pokemon Red and Blue just to play it again in a 3D environment, and to get it 20 years later basically on the Switch. Let's Go Pikachu was exactly what I wanted. I loved the yellow elements. I loved having, red, blue, and green as characters in there. I loved the convenience of having the HM abilities, so you could traverse around and push the boulders and all that stuff, just be mapped to your partner Pokemon, be it Pikachu or Eevee. And most of all, in fact, even as someone who, by the way, has never played Pokemon Go in my life, I really enjoyed the catching mechanic. The flicking the thing and catching in the little circle like in Pokemon Go. I liked that. I didn't mind that was the way it was. Like, I do enjoy catching Pokemon the traditional way, but that was a fun little thing. And I got to play a 2-player with somebody throughout the whole thing, which also made it extra fun because I love playing Pokemon games with my friends. Absolutely. That's one of the best parts of the more recent ones. And best of all, the EXP that you could earn that distributes to all of your Pokemon, and EXP that you could get for just catching Pokemon instead of just having to defeat them. Oh my God, that was so much better. Good Lord, that alone made it a much better experience for me. And getting to see like a really pretty looking 3D, interpretation of what the world looked like for Kanto, I couldn't complain. And so when I looked at that and I saw the criticisms about, it's too easy, it's baby's first Pokemon, I'm just like, to me, I just viewed it not as like, it's too easy. If anything, it's like, it's just convenient for when you don't have the time to, spend 100 hours leveling up. But if anything, it also made it a lot easier to catch all 151 if you wanted to do that. And in fact, it's funny, I've even joked about if I wanted to go back ever and play through the game again someday, I thought it'd be kind of fun if like I actually tried to go do like a Pikachu only run, and like Pikachu's my one and only Pokemon, and I just like rip shit and just not rip shit, tear ass. That's not let a giant fart. Don't take that out of context. Sorry guys. And just defeat like every trainer with only a really, really powerful like level 100 fucking Pikachu. Like, I genuinely kind of want to do that someday. Maybe I'll make that into like a special stream sometime. That might be kind of a fun thing to do. I'm being reminded by folks in the Discord server right now, funnily enough, about the other Pokemon remakes, of course. It varies because, for example, I think Heart Gold, Soul Silver is perfection. I love that remake. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, now there's an example. I talked about this on one of the Pokemon Red streams I was doing recently. I was not a fan of Gen 3. I played the original and I was so let down because I think I got my expectations up too high that I literally was having such a bad time with Ruby that by the time I got to the Elite Four and I wasn't strong enough to defeat any of them, I just gave up. I stopped playing. In fact, even when I popped it in relatively recently, like just as a fun little stream, just to see, oh, here's what my team looked like, and here's what I was, doing, 20 years ago, and immediately I was reminded how much I didn't enjoy going through Hoenn in the original. But oh my God, playing Omega Ruby was such a joyous experience. Like that game got me through like a hard time. I remember like I was really depressed at the time that it came out, and I binged through the whole game when I was away visiting my family for the holidays one time. And I loved it so much. And now that's what I think of when I think of Gen 3 is Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. I don't have, even though I grew up with it, I don't have nostalgia for the original Gen 3 games, unfortunately, or even the show either. Like Advance was kind of when I tuned out of the show for a little while. And then unfortunately on the other opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm hoping that this means that they will get the feedback and they'll make the inevitable black and white remake that we'll get someday, or sequel. Maybe they'll do Black and White 3. Who knows? Maybe they'll do that instead. But I didn't grow up playing Diamond and Pearl and Platinum, despite the fact that that was the season of the show that I worked on when I started my voiceover career, funnily enough. I went and I played the Diamond and Pearl remake. That was my first experience going to Sinnoh. And it was a great experience because I got to play it with my friends, and I played it on stream and went through the whole adventure and everything. And we had battles and checked in on each other and everything. And so that made it more of an enjoyable experience. But playing the game that way, I realized, you know what? I bet that this is a case where the remake was lesser than the original, and I would have enjoyed playing specifically the Platinum version. I think that that's the way that I would have liked experiencing Gen 4 a lot more if that was the way that I had come into it. But, I took a little bit of a chance on that one, and unfortunately it was the weakest of the remakes that they've done of all the games so far. But hopefully the next one will be better. The fact that they're taking a very long time on developing ZA and getting that out gives me a lot of hope. Which, by the way, side note, I'm very excited about that because I'm so thrilled to play a Pokemon game where you can actually in real time, move them around and stuff. I've wanted that forever also. That was part of what I envisioned being part of the 3D, red and blue remake that I was always fantasizing about. So for sure. But then we go back to movies here for a minute. So let's talk about the anime live action, remake type stuff, right? So I've experienced quite a few of them just out of, kind of morbid curiosity. And the overwhelming majority of them are pretty terrible. Now, that said, I do think that there's several of them that count more as reimagining. So I don't count, even, we know already that they're terrible, but I don't count Dragon Ball Evolution as a remake. I don't count, I don't know if I would necessarily count the Full Metal Alchemist movies because they're so heavily rearranged from what they were and so hyper, abridged in that sense. But then, I would count, say, the Phoenix Wright live action movie, which adapts pretty much the whole entire first game. And actually, I'll even go so far as to say the anime, because that's more of a quote unquote remake in a certain sense. Because it's more or less doing exactly what the original story of the game is and just doing an animated version of it with some rearranging here and there. So I've now experienced, at least 3 different versions of the first Phoenix Wright game, right? And the live action movie, I gave some credit to in that it seemed like they were trying in places where other live action anime movies in general had adapted certain things. They were really trying to, capture the spirit of some of the goofiness and weird shit. But at the same time, they made everybody a little too cool. Even the characters that looked like they were wearing little weird cosplay wigs, they played some of them just a little bit too straight. Tonally, it was kind of difficult for them to get it to work, but there were elements of that I really appreciated, that they were not afraid to let it be weird, and then when it came to the animated, the Phoenix Wright anime, I watched the entire thing, and it was a novelty. To me, it felt like a novelty. And the thing is, sometimes there isn't necessarily anything wrong with something being a novelty. Because, like, for example, Pokemon Generations, which I worked on, those were, animated versions of mostly just cutscenes from the video games, right? And in a certain sense, those little snippets, those little shorts are kind of a novelty, but they're fun. They're cool just to see those moments, like fully realized in, like full 2D animation and stuff, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. And especially on the English dub side for the Phoenix Wright anime, going back to that, I loved the casting. Like literally almost everybody in the show, I thought the casting was like perfect all across the board. So getting to hear a lot of these characters that otherwise didn't have voices, say for the very small handful of ones that got to have voices in Ace Attorney 5 and 6 and Professor Layton and crossover, that kind of thing. It was cool just to hear them with full performances and everything. And sometimes even the acting made up for the fact that, the downside was the animation and the visuals of the show did not look that great, unfortunately. And that was a major thing that turned a lot of people off because, Capcom's art in those games looks so gorgeous that, to not have it live up to quite that same level of quality was kind of unfortunate. But there was still some amusement to come from it. And then it's like, okay, Death Note is a big one because, oh my God almighty. So Death Note, I've seen the two Japan produced live action films from back before the anime was a thing. I watched those, and I enjoyed them for what they were. They were interesting, adaptations of that, but it reminded me that Death Note doesn't work without the second half of the story, no matter how much people don't like Nier and Mello. That whole part of the story is integral to Death Note. And then as opposed to, actually, it's funny because even though on one hand, I appreciated the trying to be somewhat faithful to the source material in the ways that they were on those movies, the stuff that they, strayed away from made it weaker. And then meanwhile, the American Netflix live action the Death Note movie that I watched, knowing I was probably not going to enjoy it that much. I think actually going in with a low expectation made me enjoy it more than I would have. Because Ben Diskin and I actually did a Kirblog about that many, many years ago, if you guys want to go back and check that out. But looking back on it now, my thought is like, there are ideas about it that I thought were fascinating and that felt like a cool, thing to, but again, that's a reinterpretation. That's not a remake. That's a reinterpretation with all the different elements that they changed about that particular version. And now we have this new one that's coming from the creators of, I believe the creators of Stranger Things, if I'm not mistaken. And, I'm curious to see that, and I'm curious to know if that'll be closer to say how the One Piece live action remake is going to be, which I'll get to that later at the end. Let's shift focus. Let's talk about Disney. All right. So I have watched a fair number of the live action Disney movies. I watched The Jungle Book in theaters. I went to go see that one, I think back when I was living in New York. And I have snooped on, usually on planes, the Aladdin remake, the Lion King remake, the Beauty and the Beast remake. So let me preface first and foremost about that. I do agree with the majority of the world that these are very unnecessary and very frustrating. I will say, actually, kind of relevantly, I do think that it's a little insane that people are going like nuclear on this Snow White remake. Like, yeah, of course we know it's probably not going to be that great. And I understand being, people being upset about, like some of the casting stuff and whatever. Like I've seen the criticisms of it before even seeing it, and I get it. But I've seen people like, oh, they're not even doing the premiere anymore, and they're doing very limited press because they're scared the actors are going to get killed by like crazy people. I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys, it's just a movie. Like, Snow White was my very first like hyperfixation as a little kid, and I'm probably not going to go see the movie again. Maybe I'll put it on a plane ride or something out of morbid curiosity like the other ones. But don't be threatening people's lives over it. God almighty. So you know. There's a bunch that I haven't seen. Some of the ones that I was morbidly curious about, I checked out. And, there's little things about them that I'm like, that was a neat little additional thing that they added or expanded upon or whatever, because, they're giving them a little bit of a longer runtime. Or I remember Lindsay Ellis did a really in-depth video about the Beauty and the Beast remake that she reviles very understandably so. And I'm kind of ashamed to say that when I watched that one on a plane, that one actually got me pretty emotional at the end. I actually cried at the end of the Beauty and the Beast remake, and I'm kind of like almost disgusted with myself because I'm like, why? I wasn't like, oh, it's so incredible. Because I agree with like pretty much all of Lindsay's critiques about it. But somehow it just kind of got me, I suppose. And, one of the things I do agree about was, particularly one of her many points was the thing about trying to bring logic behind everything and how like that doesn't quite work, because when you try to bring logic to something that is inherently just like, a kid's fairy tale, like you can try, but then that ends up kind of just bogging down and making more questions of like, well, but wait, that doesn't make sense, So as much as I can appreciate an effort that comes to that, on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know. So I don't know. Sometimes I'll see that there's something to these things, and again, I don't want to jump too ahead of this now, but I'll just say that my love and appreciation for the One Piece live action remake has made me like look at some of these Disney ones and I'm like, these could be good. These have the potential to be fun experiences that are different from the animated one in a way that is like legitimate, but the things that they end up doing, I feel like probably like 9 times out of 10 are just kind of like an embarrassment, and you just sort of shake your head. But, who am I to say? Because it is really funny to me that, of course, the quote unquote live action Lion King movie got to be one of the top, selling animated movies of all time, technically because it's CG animation. But then Mufasa, which I would have given more credit to because at least that is an original story. It's not a remake. It's actually them doing a new story with those characters. And if anything, because it's the same thing I appreciated, and I went to go see Christopher Robin, because that wasn't a remake of the Winnie the Pooh animated movie. It was its own story about Christopher Robin as an adult. It's like, okay, cool. But I didn't get to go see Mufasa. And then I heard that it bombed and it lost hardcore to Sonic 3. Which is really funny because speaking of that, I think I talked about Sonic 3 already. I don't think I did a proper like full-on review Kirblog of it at the time. But what I will say is I found it really interesting that movie was, for all intents and purposes, basically a remake of Sonic Adventure 2. Like that, it's basically just that as a feature film with some little things changed around. And I actually think that it is a better telling of Sonic Adventure 2's story than the actual game that it comes from. And I know I'm going to get like arrows through my head for saying that, but listen, Sonic Adventure 2 is probably, gun to my head, my favorite Sonic game. Like, probably. Or if not, it's up there, probably like alongside Generations or whatever, especially the Generations X Shadow and everything. But Sonic Adventure 2 has very, very major, gameplay, not discrepancies, but like things about the gameplay that don't hold up. Unless you really know the game and you can blast through it super easily and you know all the shit. If you're going into it blindly, like I don't know how anybody can get through that game. It's impossible. Like some of those older Sonic 3D games, they're not great design elements of certain things, how they execute. I think it's better than Adventure 2. I think Adventure 2 is better than Adventure 1. I will always hold to that. And I don't understand why people think that Adventure 1 is better than 2, but that's a whole nother, I literally did a Kirblog about that too. So anyway, nonetheless, and like the cutscene execution is abhorrent between the weird looking mocap, the bad lip sync, the bad voice acting, the bad everything. And then like even just the story itself, like even if you take away those elements and you just look completely at the story, it's nonsense. Like the big moment where Shadow has his like turn, right? About like Amy being like blah, 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 Shadow. Remember, which, okay, great thing. I hate Sonic X. I hate Sonic X, guys. Sorry to the 7 million Sonic X fan. I hate that show. But I remember when I watched the Sonic X remake, of the Sonic Adventure 2 stuff, when they did all the, the video game adaptations between Adventure 1 and 2 and Battle and whatever, they redid the scene where, Amy, knocks some sense into Shadow and gets him to, go help and save the world. They replaced it with Chris being the character that does that to, give him that wake up call. And even though I am pretty much in agreement with the rest of the world that Chris was a lame, annoying, unnecessary character. Sorry, Ems, if you're listening to this. Him being a human character that has some kind of like mild resemblance to Maria, I bought that. And the way that they execute that scene where he's like trying to like convince Shadow, and Shadow keeps knocking him away. And then finally he listens to him. That to me was a better execution than, I know that humans argue over the most silly things, but they're basically good as long as they don't give up on their wishes. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then when it cuts to Shadow crying and remembering Maria, I'm just like, I don't feel any emotional connection to this. But Sonic X, I think, did that better. And then I won't spoil it in case anybody has not seen Sonic 3 yet, but the way that they executed the equivalent of that scene where Shadow has his wake-up call and then, helps out to save the world is way better in the movie. And, the fact that it actually involves the live-action human characters that I don't like that much. I don't like Tom and Maddie and all them that much, to be honest. That says something for whatever that is coming from me. It's like, and now to the point where I know a lot of people are kind of in the same camp about a lot of the old school Sonic 3D games, but I think that game needs a remake. I honestly think that, both for because this goes to the heart of like why, remakes are made in the first place, where it's like, you want to entice the nostalgia for fans that grew up with whatever the original is to get them to want to go experience something in a new way. And you want to draw in a new audience and a new batch of fans that didn't grow up with the original, but maybe heard of it or would be interested in it, just hearing about it as if it's a new thing. Right. I think Sonic Adventure 2, even as someone who loves that game and knows it really well, I can, beat all of Adventure 2 in one sitting, which I also might do on stream at some point one day. I think that it needs a remake. I would love to see that done, because that would be exciting to me to see it redone, not only with better graphics and everything, but much better performances, better animation for the cutscenes, and maybe even expanding upon and redoing the story a little bit so that, like, even if you were to just readapt the lines, I know a lot of people got their panties in a twist over the redone lines in Sonic Generations, the X Shadow version and the Sonic story or whatever, that they redid some of the lines. But honestly, I mean, like, the Adventure 1 and 2 lines are so like horribly mistranslated. Is that what Chaos Control is? Redo the script, like just retranslate the script itself and make some sense out of it. Yeah, you can keep some of the iconic lines. You're not even good enough to be my fake. I'll make you eat those words, make a gag out of him interrupting him, for Christ's sake. Why not? Who knows? So that comes to the me making a case for something, about the whole advent of remakes in the first place. I think that there is something really exciting about the prospect of remaking something before, especially, like some people look at like, oh, but they had these limited tools and like, they had to do practical effects. They didn't have CGI for everything. They didn't have, like 3D models, and they didn't have this and that, whether it be for games or for movies or whatever. And that's fair enough. I think that there is absolutely always charm to, just having the original be the original. It's why I look at Mario RPG as the perfect example of this of all. I love the original for everything about it. Gameplay, visuals, sound, like design, writing, everything, right? And the RPG updating itself and making it look, so much more modern, that's also equally exciting to me to see, how did they make this character? Like, oh, how do they do this and how do they do that and whatever? Like, that's also cool to me. That's also, as a hardcore fan of it, like, that makes me excited to see, how they would do that and to see what they would have added and etc. Absolutely. But I also think that doing it with games is a little bit of an easier task, because often the pros that come with doing a remake as opposed to cons, typically they also have to do just as much with gameplay, like the actual experience of playing it, just as much as the enjoyment of like the visually taking in the story and the animation and graphics and whatever. So that's a little bit of a different experience where just quality of life changes, like what I said about like Paper Mario and Mario RPG, where like they made the menus a little bit more easily easy to deal with, and you could have more expansion to your the amount of coins you can have and the amount of items that you can have and little things like that just make it an overall better experience just playing it as a video game, regardless of whether you played the original or not, right? So but then when it comes to film, whether it be movies or TV or whatever, then it becomes different. Then it becomes a little bit more like it is exactly what it is. Like the medium is exactly what it is. So you're just watching it and you're just taking whatever you take away from it. I think that it's a little bit of a harder sell. But what I've noticed is I think that sometimes it does come down to the changes that are ultimately for the better. When it comes to live action, remakes, and anime is an easier example to go with. So unfortunately, I hate to say this, one of the examples that changed my mind about live action anime adaptations was Rurouni Kenshin. Now, I have not, since the news, very, very unfortunate, horrible news about the creator had come out in the with the remake and everything and all of the series, which I've not watched that. I've watched the live action movies. That was many years back. I watched the 5 of those, and so just separating that from the artist for a moment here to talk about this. I was really impressed by those movies. I really genuinely enjoyed them a lot, and I felt that they hit that perfect balance of remaking the source material and slightly reinterpreting it and condensing it in a way that worked for a great series of films. And it both captured the essence of what it was, didn't feel like it was straying too far from what the characters were supposed to be. And I think also the fact that it was like not a heavy fantasy series probably made it a little bit of an easier, pitch for adapting into a live action thing compared to other stuff, basically. But yeah, that opened my brain up to like, okay, they're capable of being good. That's mainly the reason that I'm bringing that up. So then the One Piece live action show happens, and I was sold on the first trailer, literally. And my friends and I, we binged through all 8 episodes of the first season in a single day, and I was so impressed by everything from, everything being recognizable, the actors all pretty much being perfectly cast, and, putting their spin on those characters from the manga and the anime in a way that worked really, really well to what they're supposed to be. The famous quote scenes and adapted by those. Because the thing is, okay, I know that from like a slimy executive's perspective, one of the big, going back to that term of a novelty, one of the big novelties that they expect like an audience to have over, seeing a live action adaptation specifically of an animated thing, right? Is like, isn't it cool? You can take it more seriously because it's live action. It's real people, like there's still that, even though like animation is more beloved by, people of all ages, than ever now. And it's not just a kid's thing. I think that there's still that perception of like, the only real medium that anyone in the world can ever legitimately take seriously is if something is a live action movie, and anything that isn't that, whether it be a cartoon or a video game or whatever, it just inherently can't be taken seriously. Which I don't agree with in any way, shape, or form. What I will see eye to eye with on the idea behind like where that philosophy, where that presumed philosophy comes from, is that there are little subtle things that I think live action actors capture in a different way that is not necessarily better than the way that an animated character can, but it's different. And I think that because having animated characters do that in a really, really, really subtle way costs a lot of money and is very, very difficult, and only is pulled off by either like a master artist or a team of master artists or good artists that, have a lot of money to be able to do it. Right. Which is why, like going back to the Disney animated movies, like they are more impactful, frankly, than their live action counterparts. because of that subtlety and because of how much, resources that they can put into that stuff, right? Sometimes there's cases where, like, okay, I can see, why even a creator of something that, like, they want to, see that brought to life. It's why I would understand even why the Avatar creators 2 times in a row, Last Airbender, they wanted to be involved with, interpreting their world into a live action version and working directly with, the people that were doing it. And then, unfortunately 2 times in a row, it didn't turn out that great. Sad to say. But One Piece, I think, hit every single checkbox of exactly what you would have wanted. To the point where now, not only am I so excited about the second season, I'm still waiting for some kind of teaser trailer because I know we're supposed to get it the season at some point later this year. But now, even as I've been going back and rewatching a lot of the older episodes with my friends, we just got up to right before the time skip happens, and we're taking a break for a little bit because we're waiting to see if we're going to get an English dubbed version of the Fishman Island special edited version, basically, so we can watch that. But I'm going back and watching all these older episodes from these early arcs. It's been a while since I've rewatched them, and I'm just reminded, like, man, holy shit, like, I can't wait to see how they interpret this in the live action movie, like this character or this scene or this entire arc. Like, that's how much I enjoyed it. That's how much I enjoyed it, is that, like, it is now, they've captured me in terms of, it is exciting to me to see a live action new interpretation where these little things that they do and these little subtleties that they add and the way that the casting is, the way the portrayals are, that make me love these characters. And even, I'm going to go really far when I say this, even in cases where you can improve upon the original, which sometimes I think really hardcore fans don't necessarily want to admit. But I'm gonna go on a limb. I'm gonna use a very specific example. Now, I like Sanji as a character. I really do. And I have seen everything. So, because I've seen Whole Cake Island, right? And that's the best that's the pinnacle of how good his character is, right? And he's one of the most in-depth Straw Hats. But watching it through the eyes of other people that didn't grow up with it, for 20 years, right? And they've only been watching it the last, 3 or 4 years. They hate Sanji. They don't enjoy him. Like, once in a while, he'll get a cool moment where he's not being like a sleaze or annoying or perverted. But for the most part, they don't like him. And I can't really make an argument against it. And especially in some of the anime only stuff where he's like extra gross. It's like, ugh. But then we watch the live action version, and that interpretation of him, down to the look, the performance, the writing, everything, he's great. He's suave. He's fun. And he doesn't feel like a disemboweling or like, oh, they completely wrote a new character. No, he still feels like Sanji. He still has the elements of that character that make him what he is. But in my opinion, and apparently according to a lot of people's opinions, done better, frankly. And that, to me, that single example I look to as, I'd probably, along with also just Sonic Adventure, so the Sonic 3 movie, stuff with Adventure 2 and everything. I think it is humanly possible to do the original better than it was. I think that it is humanly possible to do that in a remake. And I think that sometimes that even is what the intention is of, like, what if I had the opportunity to do this again and do it better and have something more to it that wasn't there now that it's 10, 15, 20, 30 years later and I can be involved, especially when the original creators get to be involved, right? I think that there is something to that. And sure, you could also argue like, oh, but just let art be art. Let, whatever it is, be what it is, and don't reinvent the wheel. Just do something new. But then there's the business side of it of sometimes people don't want new. Sometimes people do get excited about a rehashing version, no matter how much we complain about, oh, Hollywood has no original ideas. But people also do like new interpretations and new spins on something that existed before. And I think that the advent of something being a remake, where it is supposed to be closer to what it actually is. I do think that there is something to that. And even, I myself have thought about the idea of like, what if I were to remake this or whatever? And granted, yeah, for myself, because I only have so many resources, I would rather, go back I would rather do something new and more exciting as opposed to going back and redoing something for the most part. But yeah, I think that, and who knows, maybe because the One Piece live action show was so like pretty much unanimously well received, I do think that maybe we'll encounter some kind of renaissance of people doing remakes, putting a lot more care and effort into hitting all those check boxes of like, being respectful to the source material, tweaking things a little bit, but keeping it mostly to what it is, really thinking about how are the fans going to respond to this, getting the casting just right, not basing it off like name recognition or whatever, and improving it in a way that doesn't come off as like, annoying or weird or like, pandering or whatever. I think that it's very, very humanly possible to do that. And I hope that people, because remakes and rehashes and reboots are inevitabilities, I hope that that will be the case. I hope that as long as we're going to be getting those things, that we will get them executed the best way that they can. So those are my thoughts. What are y'all thinking? What are y'all listening? Think. What's your favorite remake and why? And what is your least favorite remake and why? Can be a movie, can be a TV show, can be a video game, can be whatever you want. And this Kirblog topic was suggested by J9. And if you'd like to suggest topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear me record them in my community Discord server before they release, consider supporting me on patreon.com at patreon.com/Kirberfer. So thank you for listening. Thank you everybody who tuned in live for the recording while I was doing this ahead of time, and everybody who listened as it premiered, and everybody who listened afterward. Appreciate you. Let me know your feedback, and I've got some cool stuff happening in the next couple months, so keep an eye out, and hope you all have a lovely rest of your March. Bye-bye.